A record number of Americans are booking a one-way ticket out of the US and moving to Europe. Frustrated by Trump's polarising politics and the US's high cost of living, they're applying for citizenship in European countries. So, why are Americans leaving their home place? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, there has been an increase in American citizens considering a move to Europe following the re-election of Donald Trump. Young remote workers in particular are attracted by flexible work visa options. With Europe's own strict immigration, how easy is it for Americans to relocate to Europe?
More and more Americans are sharing on social media that they are leaving the US for Europe.
So many Americans are looking to move abroad in light of the elections.
Tired of living in the US. I'm leaving America to move to a country that I've never been to before.
You're not depressed, you just live in the US. I moved from the US to Europe and I plan on never going back.
Since the return of US President Trump, there's been a notable increase in the number of Americans looking to move across the pond. Most cite Trump's populist politics, rising living costs, gun violence and expensive healthcare as their reasoning. American photographer Wendy Newman recently moved to London with her husband.
We are glad that we're here. We feel safer here. We feel like our rights are more upheld here in the UK compared to what they might be in the United States.
Americans applying for UK citizenship rose by 40% in the last 2 months of 2024. Irish passport applicants from US citizens jumped by 60% since January compared to the same period last year. American visa applications to France and Italy are also up. So why are US citizens so attracted to Europe? Europe offers a lower cost of living, especially appealing to those concerned about economic uncertainty caused by Trump's tariffs. Access to affordable European healthcare is also enticing US citizens, as Trump aims to slash US healthcare spending. Fears over Trump's tougher immigration policies and deportations are also pushing some to leave. But obstacles exist for those looking to move. Relocation platform Relocate says Americans in Europe face job shortages, lower pay and US tax obligations. So how many Americans will pack up and move to Europe?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Zurich in Switzerland, we have Arielle Tucker. She is cross-border financial planner. She's specialising in US expats and globally mobile families. In Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, we have Chrishan Wright. She's the founder and host of the Blaxit Global podcast. She moved from the US to Lisbon, Portugal. And in Georgia, in the United States, we have Clayton Cartwright, who is an international tax attorney. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Chrishan, to you first. Talk me through that decision, making the move, deciding that there's a better life for you in Europe. I mean, a lot of people might feel that moving halfway across the world to escape your president is pretty drastic.
Yeah, it took a lot of planning. So originally I intended on moving to New Zealand, which is even further away. But I think one of the beautiful things about Europe, at least for me, my youngest child was going off to college and it afforded me the opportunity to be within, half a day's flight back. It's very peaceful where I am in Portugal and definitely right now where I am in the Netherlands. And I love the safety. There's a lot of gun violence, we know, in the United States, a lot of divisiveness. And so if you want to get away from that, also have more flexibility, affordability, the ability to travel, I think Europe is a great option.
Amazing. Arielle, talk to me about your business. Are you seeing an uptick in people approaching you looking for advice, and people who maybe weren't always planners are now suddenly planning for a life outside of the US?
Yeah, so right after the election, that week, our website almost, shut down due to overwhelming support. And we're a really small boutique practice. And so we only onboard maybe 1 or 2 clients a month. And so we had 30, people booking calls with us for the following week after the election. So that would be like almost 3 years of work for us. And so I found that so many of those people were just desperate to take some type of action. They didn't really fully understand maybe what the tax or financial consequences of moving abroad were, but they just wanted to talk to someone about, could they leave?
Wow. Clayton, to you, just talk me through the rules, because if you stay as a US citizen, no matter where you go in the world, you've still got to pay US tax, correct?
That's correct. I mean, the US, along with Eritrea, are the 2 countries in the world that tax individuals on their worldwide taxation based upon citizenship only. And so it doesn't matter where in the world that U.S. citizen moves, they're still going to be subject to U.S. income tax on their worldwide income, still required to file something known as the foreign bank account report, which carries very large penalties if for failure to file. And they'll be likely tax resident in the other country. So if they're moving to Europe, Europe is no tax haven. The countries in Europe are no tax havens. And so there'll be double tax resident. Now, that there's foreign relief that will basically allow for those individuals to pay the higher of the 2 rate regimes. But the regimes, the U.S. regime and the regime of a European country, aren't exactly congruent.
Chrishan, to you, do you think this is a knee-jerk reaction post-Trump's re-election, or will people stay longer? I mean, is it a 4-year deal, or do you think Americans will start putting down roots in various different European countries and stay for a very long time?
Yeah, if you look at the data, this migration is not a new phenomenon. Typically, when a presidential, election happens, there's a jump in searches for people who look to move abroad. What we're seeing differently this time, though, is people putting the steps together to put action. And they're looking either in the near term, so saying, hey, I don't know if I want it to be forever. Maybe I'll take a career sabbatical. I might work remotely. There's a lot of mobility that has happened as a result of the pandemic. And then there's people who are saying, hey, you know what? I think this is going to be a longer term endeavor. They may feel that the US isn't home, that they can no longer attain the American dream in America, and that the new American dream is to live abroad.
Arielle, what advice are you giving clients then when they come to you? Because I'm guessing a lot of these people may not have been massive travelers in the past, and suddenly they want to move to places like Portugal and Switzerland and Italy, having never been there.
Yeah. So the first thing I ask is, do you have a passport? And if you don't have a passport, step 1, go and get your US passport. And then I would say, go on vacation, explore Europe. Because when people say, I want to move to Europe, I'm like, which country, which region of which country? Where do you want? They all feel so different. Right. And so you really need to understand, like for me, I live in Switzerland. I've lived in Germany. I'm originally from upstate New York. And culturally, like those countries really fit with me. I could never move to Portugal. It wouldn't work for me. So I think it's really important to understand how the different countries kind of work for your personal situation, your personality, what you like. And then once you have those steps in place, we can make a plan. We can build that. We can plan around, being a tax resident in 2 countries. We can explore opportunities with different visa opportunities. But step 1, travel and explore. Spend this summer in Europe. It's actually very affordable to travel in Europe compared to the US.
Clayton, is this a very middle-class dilemma in America? I mean, do you have to be rich to have ambitions to move out of the States and come to a European country? I mean, how much money do you need to do this?
Well, I think you have to have the ability to realize it's not just tax issues, but it's also there are what I call transactional costs. I mean, this is the cost of advisors to do this properly. I think there is a bit of a myth that one who works as an employee can just pick up and just take their laptop and move and work remotely anywhere in the world. I mean, there are immigration issues as well. So if I think Arielle is correct about sampling a place here. She's spot on about that, but also one has to have the ability to, from an immigration perspective, to have a work visa or the ability to, to perform those services remotely. If you're working for an employer, you need to go and get employer approval as well. And even if you have the means, the individual has the means to fund things, the employer might just say, no, we're not going to take on the transactional costs of having you work abroad. And so there are a lot of obstacles one has to go through here. I wouldn't say it's a it's a middle class ability, but an upper middle class, maybe if you're a highly desirable employee from an employer, you're able to do it. And if you're on your own business, there are more options available to you as well.
Chrishan, talk me through the family reaction you had then when you said, I'm moving to Lisbon. Did they all say, where?
A little bit of that. They were happy that it was no longer New Zealand because I took it for a test drive twice. I went on a scouting trip several years ago just to see if New Zealand was going to be a good fit. But yeah, my family, it took a while. It took many years to get them, nurture them along the process because everybody is a stakeholder. And so I really needed to understand what were the concerns from my daughter. She didn't want me on the other side of the world while she was in college. And so for me, I looked at Portugal as possibly being a 4-year endeavor. For my mom, she wanted me to be able to get back to her pretty quickly. And luckily, Portugal is straight across the Atlantic and I can get to Florida. And so we have that connectedness. We talk every day. So it's really about understanding who the stakeholders are in your family, or in my case, my family, and what their needs are, and then what you can negotiate. And then for me, what I wound up deciding when I got here was that I could afford to retire early because fortunately for me, Portugal has a retirement visa that is not age-based, unlike some other countries. And so I was able to retire early.
And tell me, how do Portuguese people feel about a glamorous American lady suddenly parachuting into Portugal? Have you been made welcome?
Muito bem, muito bem.
I love it, speaking the language as well. Arielle, where else are Americans interested in Europe? I guess the UK is a big attraction. France, we can blame Emily in Paris on Netflix. That has driven a lot of traffic to France the last few years and seasons of that series. Where else do Americans want to live?
Yeah, so I think about hotspots and I think about Italy, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, especially those countries that are willing to give any type of tax discounts or special visas for remote workers. Those have been really popular. People are really asking about those.
Clayton, what's the timescale on this? If you wake up the next morning after President Trump has won and Kamala Harris has lost, what's the planning and the timescale here? Are we talking weeks or months?
Well, from a tax perspective, if the person is just starting cold and I'm onboarding them as a client, I would say at least 90 days in terms of planning. I mean, the first order of business would be to pull a worldwide balance sheet on the individual to see exactly what the potential exposure would be for moving abroad, and also would allow for time to obtain proper tax advice to also engage for the client to engage other advisors abroad in those local jurisdictions so that we can have a comprehensive tax strategy for them moving abroad. Also, of course, there's the immigration issue too. To the extent that the individual wants to work abroad, I mean, it's going to take time for them to contact their employer, get approval from their employer, see what, if any, necessary visas are required in those other jurisdictions. For example, Spain has a remote work visa. And there are also special expatriate tax regimes, though the U.S., if you're still tax resident in the U.S. as a citizen, those benefits are kind of moot because the U.S. will tax you anyway.
Chrishan, to you, what's the impact then on the USA? Loads of smart people who've worked hard, they've got cash, and they decide to bail out. What's the brain drain in the long term on the USA?
Yes, there's definitely an exodus and a brain drain. So for the US, that is a huge loss because you're seeing top talent take their talents and skills and either use it to their benefit, become an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, people who have been discarded or locked away from the American dream are able to realize those in other countries. So I know there are people where I live in Portugal that have been able to start businesses, restaurants, bars, what have you, that would have been cost prohibitive or they would have faced a discrimination in the United States. And so, from their perspective, they're able to realize things for themselves that they never thought possible. And so, for the US, I think there needs to be, a thought about what is the long-term strategy? How do we start to invest in our citizens and ensure that they are not only educated, but supported through their life so that they don't feel this squeeze and feel a need to leave? But I think, it's very multifaceted.
Arielle, you are a planner by nature. Tell me, did you see this coming, this uptick in business? Were you watching the election coverage pre-November thinking, this is going to be great for me?
I have to admit, I did not see a second Trump term, transparently. I really did not. And so when I woke up the next day, I was really shocked as well. I won't expand on that too much, but I do have two thoughts, like to Clayton's point. I think tax planning is just so important for U.S. expats, right? Because entity types that work in the U.S. don't exist in other countries. And same with entity types in these foreign countries. Like if you're working with a local accountant, they may suggest a lot of advanced tax planning, but that may not work in the US. And so it's really important, that advanced tax planning component that Clayton does, that is just so important and cannot be understated for people with complex or high net worth situations, or even just people who want to go start businesses and do it in a tax efficient way in their new jurisdiction.
Clayton, can I just ask your opinion on this? President Trump has had a lot to say about US universities, people protesting in support of Palestinians and Gaza. Do you think that's driving a lot of academics out of the US and towards Europe?
I think it lends to itself to the environment here. I mean, keep in mind as well, certainly from a student perspective, many of these students that come in are from high net worth families. So I think sometimes we think of a student visa and we think of it maybe, at least from the U.S. perspective, sort of say, okay, there's, because maybe we think of upward mobility, that we think of it as sort of coming from, lower rungs. But a lot of these individuals are coming in, they're from high net worth families. And so, particularly the issue that's happened recently with visa revocations, that causes actually some tax planning problems for those high net worth families, because those individuals usually should be non-resident in the United States, which is very helpful for family tax planning, worldwide tax planning. If those visas, if the IRS determines that those individuals aren't compliant with their visas, now I mean the IRS, not the Department of Homeland Security, they could lose their exemption and be deemed tax resident, which causes big problems. So yeah, you see the background environment that's here, and so I think for prospective students, looking at the United States, I think there's a pause. There's a pause in that, and I've dealt with a couple of those issues with with my current client base, to assure them.
Chrishan, you mentioned earlier on security and how safe you feel in Portugal. Just tell me about your life in Portugal. What is it you like so much compared to back in the States?
Oh, I love the freedom of movement. I can leave my house at any hour and feel safe, walk my dog, go to a concert, hop a plane, go to another country. I love that I can connect with my neighbors. Actually, yesterday I got locked out of my building and had to use, a little bit of rough Portuguese to try to communicate with one of my neighbors. And she was so helpful. She came downstairs, called the building super, let me borrow her key to make a copy. And it was great. And, some of these things would be a little harder to do in the US. I think there's definitely a big fear factor, a lot of othering of people, and it makes it hard to be connected. I think we've definitely lost our way in that regard. I love the fact that my siblings have come to visit, my children have come, and they see how happy I am. And I also have my community through Blaxit Global. I help Black expats who are aspiring expats who want to move abroad. And so we have a growing community in Portugal. We put on events, we're always together. And I also help people move to different countries around the world. And so part of my day is really shepherding people through the process that we've been talking about today.
Chrishan, just tell me, do you feel you've been made more welcome in Portugal than perhaps, say, a young Portuguese migrant moving to a certain town in the southern states might have been made feel? Talk me through that. How have you experienced it?
Yeah, I will say that, I spent a lot of time in deep reflection, and I have traveled to 20 plus countries at this point. And now for my first time living abroad, I have to say that people are more welcoming to me as an immigrant than we are to immigrants in the United States. And that is so disheartening. I originally am from New York City, and so we talk about how diverse, the United States is, and then, enclaves not like New York in particular. But I have to say that, the diversity of people within Portugal has been great to experience. And I definitely feel most welcome. And I hope that with conversations like this, that it sparks some debate about how we treat people, and particularly how we treat immigrants in the United States, because right now it's really disheartening.
That's a very good point, Chrishan. Thank you for speaking so eloquently. Arielle, do you think some of your clients will be quite amazed when they move to Europe and they find people that are welcoming, safe streets, no gun crime, certainly not on a level that you have in the United States? Do you think people are very pleasantly surprised?
I think there's just so much cultural shock. So I have two children, for example, who are in elementary school, and they walk to school by themselves. There's no busing in our town of 50,000 people. Everyone just walks to school. And the kindergartners walk to school from the age of 4, right? And so can you imagine in the US, 4-year-olds walking around by themselves, right? Or 5-year-olds walking around by themselves. I really can't imagine it. And it can actually be really hard for US citizens who are used to, driving to the school, standing in the car, driving through the carpool line. And now you're being told you're not allowed to drive your kids to school. That's really hard. And so it takes really learning about the culture, getting to know your neighbors, like Chrishan said. I think that's such a beautiful sentiment. And understanding what's okay in your community. I mean, bad things happen everywhere. But I do feel like we have this luxury of freedom, especially for children. Like my kids go up and they do forest days. And they give, again, 4, 5, 6-year-olds knives and have them around the fire to cook sausages at lunch. Again, things just would never happen in the US.
Thank you, Arielle. Clayton, to you, how do you think President Trump will feel about this exodus of Americans? I guess if the money keeps coming in tax revenue, he probably won't care too much.
Yeah, I think I think that this is not his focus here. I mean, you'll see, maybe some prominent examples of individuals moving abroad. I mean, in the past, it was Tina Turner, right? Was one prominent American who moved abroad and actually moved to Switzerland and gave up her U.S. citizenship. Here, I mean, we're seeing, a spike in U.S. citizens, American citizens moving abroad. We're not yet seeing a spike in renunciations, loss of citizenship. We really won't know because there's a time lag on the data until, for the next 18 months or so, towards the end of actually in early 2027 when we'll start seeing that information, because individuals who give up citizenship now will report next year. And then we'll see that data starting to flow through. It's not a large number of citizens.
Final point to you, Chrishan. We get a lot of American viewers on Roundtable. If someone is watching from the States and they're curious about your journey and your decision-making and your new life in Europe, what advice would you give them?
Oh, I would say first, get in community. I think, for many of us who make this decision, we are the first in our families to do so, the first in our peer group. And so you're going through all of the emotions, talking about a lot of the steps we've outlined in this discussion, and you're doing it in isolation. But there are people just like you who are inspired, who want to take action. And so getting in a community is the best way that you can start to fast track your progress and process. I say, listen to the Blaxit podcast, of course, for inspiration along the journey. And definitely, what we've talked about, look at taxation aspects on both sides, the country that you're intending to go to, as well as the country that you're leaving from. And think about how you're going to manage all of those logistics. We talked about family and things like that, and work. And thinking about, what you want for your future.
Chrishan, obrigada to you, and thank you to Clayton and Arielle as well. A brilliant discussion there. Thank you so much. Remember, you can see more debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.